Welcome back. To becoming a published author is fun. And if that title confuses you or you want to understand more why it is fun, I explain it in episode 8. But today we are in episode 17. And the title of it is Inspiration. And the reason is very simple. This lady right here. This is my wife. Many of you know her as Tess Riddle. Let's get that so there's no glare. Now, this is a book that I wrote. It's called The Best of Tess. And it's a collection of 3 of her books that she actually wrote 4. The other one is a novel, which is also available in the bookstore. But she wrote 3 ladies' devotionals. They're all in that book, plus a 4th one that she was working on, and I actually finished it by adding a postscript to it that covers the last 2 months of her life. That part in itself is worth the price of the book. It was a work of love on my part, but it brought back memories, precious memories that I will forever remember. But she's an inspiration to me. And I thought about myself, I said, that's a good title, a good idea to pass on to you as a potential writer, or maybe you're an existing writer, or you might even be a published author. So I want to look at it, first of all, let's look at it as a writer. Now, in this case, we are also using it as a published author. There is a slight difference that my wife always talked about. I was telling her that she was already an author, and she said, "No, I'm not. I won't be an author until I get published." And I thought, well, she's got a point there. But you're also a writer if you like to write, if you like to tell stories and so forth. So the two are almost synonymous, but and interchangeable. But in the sense that she was meaning it is a very distinctive thing, and it applies here. She is an inspiration to me. Although I've been writing long before she did, she was an inspiration to me as a person and as my wife, of course. But she was an inspiration to me. And it's a good idea to have somebody in mind as your inspiration. It doesn't have to be your spouse. It can be somebody else, not even a relative. It could be a friend. It could be somebody you don't even know. You just simply admire them to the extent that they inspire you to do what you do. So that is one aspect of it. But I want to talk to you today, not in that sense, but in a sense that's going to be very important to you going forward. And this is in your writing. The character building. You're going to be developing over a period of time. You develop characters for your story. You're going to have a primary character, secondary characters, and so forth. And one of the things I teach in the course is how to build a character, the different things. But we're going to touch on that a little bit here. Now, you can use multiple people, real people, mind you, as an inspiration for one character. You'll probably find something of me in everyone, and not because I inspire myself, mind you, because when writing, I tend to get into the character, and so my personality and other things will flow into there, and different aspects will show up in different characters that I'm developing. But you might have somebody else in mind for your character. In the case of The Best of Tess, I also She was the inspiration for that story, for that book. Well, you may have a story in mind. You may already have it in process of writing it. And there's a good chance that your primary character is based on somebody that you know. And that's okay. But don't use their real name. Unless if it's a nonfiction, that's a different story. If you're writing fiction, you don't use the name. You can use part of the name, but I wouldn't even recommend that. Because people tend to take things personally, and they say, "You wrote that about me? I never gave you permission to do that. And the things you say about me, they're not true." Well, that's true. It's a fiction. It's a novel. So to avoid that, you never use their real name, except in nonfiction. For instance, if I was using a book and writing a book and Teresa was the inspiration for that character, I would not use the name Teresa, or even Tess. I would use something else, maybe Julie, or Julia, or Elizabeth, or some other name that is not in any way related to her. Now, she's not here to complain about it, but the thing is that you want to avoid. Now, some people are going to think you're writing about them anyhow, and you may not have even had them in mind. But this is just to avoid conflict. It can happen if you are not careful. But don't use their name in your story. Another thing you don't do is don't only use them. Almost every one of my characters, in fact, I'll say this, all of my characters are made up of different people. And so they may only touch the color of the hair, if they have hair. It may only their eye color. Maybe somebody has beautiful eyes, and so you put that in there. Maybe somebody's stature, or character, attitude, or characteristic, or maybe even just their experience or intelligence. It could be anything that inspired you to put that into that character. And so you could have a multitude of attributes gotten from different people and put them into that character. And that's a good thing to do. If the more you can do it and make it all flow together, the better. So don't make her the only, or another word for that is primary. Use a variety of different people. Then the only thing here is, let's take this part off, the don'ts. That's my two don'ts. Now, you have different types of characters. You have your primary character. You also have a secondary character. Actually, secondary characters, because you're going to have plural. And it's possible you might have plural primaries too. It's more difficult to write that, but not impossible. And I even talk about that in the course. Usually, you want your primary character to be triumphant. Now, in doing that, I have to say this. I read a book in which the character ended up he was a primary character in the book, and he ended up anything but triumphant. But that disturbed me a little bit. But I still enjoyed the entire book. And so it's a little bit more, if you're not going to have them triumphant, it'll make it a little bit more difficult. But that's not impossible. I have a friend of mine who wrote a book that his character had quite the life and ended up dying at the end. And it was something of a tragic life. Yet you draw some positive principles and ideas from it. And there's even a little bit of peace that comes to him at the very end. So the thing is, the author just drew all this together, and so the character died, but not as bad as it could have been, and even you might even say that he was triumphant at the very end. So those are some things I'm wanting to pass on to you about character building. Character building is a very important part of writing, of being a published author. You want your characters to be believable. Let's put that down. You want them to be believable. That is why you use real people for inspiration. So how do you go about deciding who's going to be your inspiration? Well, that is really not a thing which you follow a plan. At least I don't. But you have an idea of who you want your character to be, the type of character and so forth. And that's when you come up with, who do you know? Who do you know that has that characteristic, or one of those characteristics? How do they dress? How do they act? How do they express themselves? Where have they lived? Where have they grown up? And so forth. Notice I'm using the W's. The how is in there. That's the how. But do you have a who, where, and what? You ask these questions, and you're going to get all sorts of answers. My suggestion is to make a list. We just put down a list here. Make a list of who you want to include. You may end up narrowing that list down, and you don't need their permission to do this, because their name's not going to be associated with it. They're just an example in your mind of who it is, and then when you write it and you're doing that, you're actually thinking about how that person would react to something or do something or anything that's in your book. So having somebody or some buddies to inspire you, first to be a writer, and then secondly, in your character building itself, in the storyline, the whole thing, having an inspiration, an inspiring person to influence you is a very good thing to have. And you're not going to have to say, well, who am I going to do today? No. Let your mind flow. As you're looking at as you're looking at your story, there's a good possibility that as your story starts forming in your mind, different people that you actually know will pop up. And you can use those people to influence your character and your more. In some cases, I may find my inspiring character in the primary character, maybe even in the antagonist, and in some of the secondary characters. It's possible. It's very, very, very possible. But that is a skill that you will develop. Don't expect yourself to be perfect or at the top of it. In fact, you probably never will be perfect. I know I'm not. But I've gotten better and better and better at it. And I don't even really think about it as to the who. It's just they pop in. And it may be only for that, like, one particular feature or one particular attitude or whatever. And then you move on, and it's others feeding in. And that all comes together to help you develop a believable character especially if it's a primary character, who can carry the story and literally take it over. That's today's episode, and I will see you in the next episode.